Hello, everyone. Welcome to Friday's ESPN FC Live. My name is Mark Donaldson. Delighted to be alongside the former Liverpool player Stevie Nicol and from ESPN.com, Ryan O'Hanlon. Later in the show, we'll be previewing the international games coming up this weekend. But I want to start with an article that Ryan has written. Basically, he's gone through the top leagues in Europe and analysed who's doing well and who isn't with regards to getting the best bang for your buck. Who has achieved the most right now by spending the least? So we'll start with the full screen graphic that will show us a bit of a surprise at number one. In fact, the top 10, all of these teams haven't spent too much, but have probably overachieved, including Heidenheim in position number one with the longest serving manager in the history of German football, Frank Schmidt, a team that came up on the final day of last season from the second Bundesliga, and they're holding their own. First of all, Ryan, what was the criteria behind your placings as we rank Europe's top leagues?
Yeah, so I just looked at we don't have totally precise wage data for players because finances in European soccer are purposely opaque, as we're finding out with all of the various financial shenanigans that are happening in the Premier League than elsewhere. But from the site Football Reference, they have relatively accurate estimations of teams' wages. So what I did was I just looked at the wage bill for every team in Europe and essentially calculated how many dollars they're spending per point that they've won. And then in order to compare all the teams across Europe, I looked at each league's average and then compared the leagues to each other, because if you compared each team to the league average and then ranked them, because if you just did like a Europe-wide average, all the Premier League teams would be in the bottom, because the point per game totals for each team, or dollar per point per game, to make it as confusing as possible. In the Premier League, it's about $100,000 are being spent per point one in the Premier League per game, while second highest is the Bundesliga at 58,000. So there's a big discrepancy. So what I just said, with the Bundesliga being second and Heidenheim are basically a mid-table team this year in the Bundesliga, and as you alluded to, they have the longest serving manager history of Germany. They were a mid-table team in terms of wages in the second division in Germany. And so they've increased their spend a little bit when they've gone up, but they're one of the lowest wage bills in Europe, and they're a mid-table team in Germany. Germany's the second highest spending league after the Premier League. Therefore, Heidenheim is number one on the list.
We'll get to the juicy stuff. Who's bottom? Who's wasting so much money in a second? And I'm sure you can guess some of the teams that will be down there. But Stevie Nicol, looking at number 5, Girona, number 6, Luton. There are players that play for Luton that have been with them through all the divisions. And for Girona, it's only their 4th season in the top flight. Football needs that, doesn't it? Football needs these fairy tale stories.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the key, particularly with the two teams you've just spoken about there, the mixture that they have of youth and experience, I think, is the key. You know, you've got people like Ross Barkley at Luton pulling along young guys like Morris, who have been around for a while but don't know what the Premier League's all about. And the same with Girona. You got Daley Blind there, and then you got the young Brazilian Savio. So I think the key for all of these teams, yes, we're talking about money and spend and net spend and all this, but the key to the makeup of the team, to me, is about the mixture, the blend of experience and youth. And obviously, when you have such an old campaigner leading Heidenheim who knows what he's doing with that mix, then you end up getting real good results. And for me, I would like to have seen Girona up the top. I know this is about calculations, but personally, when I look around Europe, I find it hard to see how Girona's not number one. I mean, sitting in the top of the Spanish league for so long, clearly they were going to have a hiccup. They're having it right now, pretty much. But I tell you, if I was to choose my number one, it would be Girona. They've been scaring the big boys in Real Madrid and Barcelona all season. And as good as Heidenheim are doing, I think for me, Girona would probably be my number one.
Let's get straight to those that have either wasted money or have spent so much that they are not Europe's smartest spenders, according to the graphic at the bottom of the screen. This is the bottom 10. So if the top 10 are Europe's smartest spenders, Ryan, what are this lot?
I think people will be surprised to see. Of these teams, they'll be surprised to see Real Madrid, I guess, in the bottom 10, right? Because they're easily winning La Liga. They're one of the more successful teams in Europe over the past decade, etc. But I think it just points to like the situation in La Liga. It's as if you took like Manchester City. You took Manchester United's wage bill, but maybe a better functioning organization, and then took, let's say, Tottenham, and then put them in a different league where all of the other Premier League teams were like able to spend as much as the teams in the Championship. So like the financial disparity in La Liga is like absurd, to the point where it's almost just like how do you not win La Liga or come in second every year? Like you have to like almost actively make your team terrible, basically, I would say, for a team like Real or even Barcelona to sort of just the sheer force of the gravity of their spending pushing them into the top. But I think among the other teams in this list, we see Man U, obviously, last ranked team in the Premier League, and their wage bill is basically competitive with Manchester City at the highest level in the Premier League, which makes them one of the highest spending teams in the world. I think top 3 or 4 in terms of wage bill, and they're currently in 6th place. So you do the math there, and that's how you end up in the 90s of this list.
We'll get stuck into the top 6 from the Premier League in a second and show you where they lie in this list. But Stevie, I just want to go back to the bottom 10 spenders and kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, because you would think, and we'll get on to Chelsea in a second and their 1.1 billion spent, but this is more on wages that's costing the club. Real Madrid spent a lot of money, but they got Jude Bellingham, and look at the impact he is having. Bayern Munich have got Harry Kane. Look at the impact he is having. So what's the secret, do you reckon, if you're spending a lot of money on stars? It's not all about that. It's about what you surround them with, isn't it?
Yeah, clearly it's what you surround them with, but again, you have to be producing silverware as well. If you want to be in that position as far as spending money is concerned, then you have to have something on the end of it. And when I look at that list, it's not just about getting silverware and spending money. You have to do it in a way that you're not jeopardizing the standing of the club. And if there's one club that, in my mind, is doing that, it's Barcelona.
Yeah.
They've kind of sold a lot of the crown jewels. You can argue that some of the signings haven't been particularly great, certainly haven't worked out. Look what they're doing in the league. They're not going to win the league. There's no chance. They find themselves in a fortunate position in the Champions League that they've had a good draw and they could end up in the final of the Champions League. But they've done it all to the detriment of the future of the club, in my opinion. It's one thing to take money out of the base of your club, but how do you replace it? Where are you going to put it back? And then add on top of that you've signed players that everybody's kind of scratching their head and saying, really? Like Christensen from Chelsea, for me, really? You're struggling for money and you go and sign somebody like him? A lot of their decisions have been questionable, but for a lucky draw in the Champions League, they could be in real trouble. So, yeah, I look at that list and I kind of don't have too much of a problem, particularly with the Real Madrid. If you spend 100 million on somebody and you're sitting top of the league and you're still in the Champions League and you're flying and he's your top goal scorer in your league, then you can accept spending that amount of money. But I look at Barcelona and I scratch my head and I wonder where they're going to be in 3 or 4 years, because I don't know how they're going to replace all that money that they took out of the club.
Just before, Ryan, we move on to the top 6 in the Premier League. Paris Saint-Germain, bottom. Stevie made the point there about, if you're going to spend, you want to get silverware. They didn't buy all these superstars over the last few years to win the French top flight. They bought them to win the Champions League. Is that the reason that they're bottom?
Yeah, I mean, they're bottom because they have the highest payroll of any team in Europe, and they play in France, which the average payroll of those teams is significantly lower than all the teams in the other leagues. It's at the points per. Sorry, I created this incredibly complicated term. Dollars spent per 0.1 per game is like in the 40,000 range in Liga, while it's in the 100,000 range in the Premier League. And yet PSG is the highest spending team in the world. So when you make that comparison and you look at the fact that PSG it's not like they're winning like 100 points per season in Liga. They're winning, 85. So when you do the points per dollar spent, you drop all the way to the bottom. But obviously for them, yes, the Champions League is the thing that they're going for. But I think even just looking at this list, right, like I said, they're the highest spending team in Europe, and they've made the Champions League final once, and only really come close to winning it, I would even say once, since Qatar took over.
Okay. The top 6 in England. Look, higher up the table, the likes of Brighton and Brentford, because they've done really well. It's like kind of Porto, an Ajax model. It's find good scouting, get good players in, sell them for lots of money to Chelsea. At least that's what Brighton have done. So Liverpool out of the top 6, or the big 6, not the top 6 in the Premier League, are higher ranked. Manchester United, no, not very good for what they have spent. Stevie, as far as Liverpool's spend has been concerned and what they're paying their players right now, are they overachieving, underachieving, or about right?
I would think they're about right.
Okay.
Listen to it. See, here's one of the problems to calculate this is that, every league plays, there's only so many points you can get. If you're going to do this and you're going to weigh things up by points, then the league that has the most money is going to spend more money, and there's only so many points you can get, and that other leagues can get the same amount of points. So, in some ways it's very difficult to figure out who's spending the money more wisely or who spent it better. But as far as Liverpool, I would suggest that they're probably in and around the right place. They're not the biggest spenders, but they're competing on every front, not just domestically, but in Europe as well. And so you can't argue that they've put themselves in that position, A, by spending the amount of money they have, and B, by spending it wisely, that they're competing on every front. Obviously, up until the weekend when they lost in the FA Cup. So yeah, I don't think you can argue, or anybody can argue, that Liverpool, yes, have spent a lot of money, but they certainly seem to have spent it wisely.
I'll tell you what, the money you spent on ventriloquist lessons was definitely worth it, because you were able to say all that without your lips moving for a large chunk of time when your picture froze. Final question, and hopefully your Wi-Fi is back. I know Ryan's done this based on wages and everything like that. Who's wasted the most money in the Premier League, Stevie? Is it Chelsea? Is it Manchester United? Or is it someone else?
What an easy! I wish you had so many easy questions like that. Absolutely, Chelsea.
A wee softball.
What a dolly! That's what you call a dolly question.
It is. It's called check your Wi-Fi and see if it's back, and hopefully we don't get a decent response.
Yeah, no. I don't think anybody's going to argue that the answer to that is Chelsea.